Do we have roll call, please?
Supervisor Galloway.
Present.
Supervisor Pruitt.
Here.
Supervisor O'Brien.
Here.
Mr. Smith.
Here.
Supervisor Goolsby.
Here.
Mr. Higgins.
Here.
Supervisor Barlow. Supervisor Woodward.
Here.
Supervisor Reed.
Here.
Supervisor Rutherford.
Here.
Commissioner Duranzio.
Here.
Counselor Payne.
Here. Okay, very well. Next we have the nobody participating out of town for that, so it's all okay. Any comments from the public? Do you have any comments? Please, in 2 minutes. Would anybody like to speak to the board, the commission? All right, seeing none, then move on to presentations. The whole annual action plan, draft and presentation, I'm sorry.
All right, good evening. So normally, my staff member, Lori Jean Talloon, would be presenting this for you. But I will do the honors tonight as she's on vacation. There we are. One of these days we'll figure out how to make that bar disappear. Anyway, the Home CDBG 2025-2026 annual action plan is in your packet today. This is a plan for the home consortium that is made up of the same jurisdictions as the TJPDC, just under a different agreement. It is funded by HUD through the Home Investment Partnership Program, and it is formula funds that are received for the region. And they are used for building, buying, and rehabbing affordable housing units for either rental or home ownership, or providing direct rental assistance to low-income households. These funds come to the consortium annually. We have not found out what the allocations are for this next year yet, but we have drafted the plan as required and hope to update the plan with the final numbers before we have to send it in. For program year 2025, we estimate about $651,000 coming to the region for the home consortium. The way these funds are distributed, we take 10% for administration of the program. 15% is set aside for CHOTO. That's a special project, and that rotates through all 6 jurisdictions. And then the rest by agreement is split 6 ways to each locality. So you can see the breakout here. Really, we're looking at about $83,000 going to each of the jurisdictions. It's not a lot of funds, so they don't go very far, but we are able to do a lot of rehab work with these funds and some gap funding. So we do have a home CDBG consolidated plan. It's a 5-year period. We're 3 years into the current plan. We are also required to do an annual action plan, which is basically how we're going to achieve the goals in that plan for this year. You may be wondering why I keep saying CDBG as well. This plan also includes CDBG, but Charlottesville City is the only entitlement recipient for those funds. Use of CDBG funds for the other 6 jurisdictions or other 5 jurisdictions would have to go through the state's CDBG allotment, not directly from HUD, as they're not a part of the entitlement. The 5-year plan showed us that the major issues in the area were folks paying more than 30% of their income towards their housing costs. There are a lack of affordable rentals, which has been talked about a lot. We have a lot of substandard housing in the region, just not safe, which is why we end up having to do a lot of rehab work to keep their people in their homes, and accessibility issues. People who are disabled often need modifications to rental units, and there are funds available to help with that. The CHOTO rotation that I mentioned This plan year, Greene County is the recipient, and they have at this time over 25 rental units reserved for low-income households, and will either purchase or build additional units with these funds. So I mentioned there were goals in the 5-year plan. Those goals are to expand the affordable housing stock in the region, preserve the existing supply of affordable housing, and ensure housing is accessible to residents under 60% of the area median income. We've achieved a lot already with these funds: 37 rental units, 10 home buyer units, 116 homeowner rehab units, 1 rental unit rehabbed, and 22 households provided with down payment assistance, and 24 households provided with rental assistance in Charlottesville. So I did say that this was not a lot of funding, but we're still able to make a huge impact with it. There are planned activities for this year, shown here by jurisdiction. We have about 24 homeowner rehabs planned for this next year, 10 rental units planned, 1 home buyer planned, and 9 direct support, either down payment assistance or tenant-based rental assistance. Public comment is currently in progress. It will end May 15th. Charlottesville City Council is anticipated to approve this same plan, since they are the consortium lead entity, on May 5th. You all tonight will consider approving the plan, and we'll also hold a public hearing. And the plan is due to HUD in the end of June. And the activities will commence July 1. What questions do you all have?
We know we're getting the money.
Nope,
We know what the money is gonna be.
nope,
This is even worse than it was last year.
yes,
And later.
and later, yes. So we shall see.
As a matter of fact, the recommended action motion, I would like to revise, because I would like us to be able to recommend that you guys adopt it, with the exception that we will update the annual funding amount when it's confirmed, so we don't have to bring it back in order to get the dollar.
Yeah, that's become SOP with the city for this.
Highly efficient functional fire.
So,
All right.
So before you take
Have a
action,
Public hearing?
yes, we need to do a public hearing.
Anybody wishing to speak on this matter? Public? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Any discussion from the board? Do we have a motion for the resolution? For the resolution, or you want me to read it?
Yeah, I can read it, and we can just say, staff recommends a motion to adopt the 2025-26 home CDBG annual action plan as presented, with the exception that the annual funding amount will be revised when confirmed by HUD.
Mr. Walsey, seconded by Mr. Higgins. We'll get it to all those in favor? Aye. Chair votes aye, much passes unanimously. Okay. Moving on now, we're on to get legislative reports. Oh, I'm sorry, we need to do the resolution too.
That's what you did, you go.
Motion.
Yeah, same.
Thank you.
All right, good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. Wanted to spend just a little bit of time with you this evening. Take a quick look back at the 2025 session, also look ahead to some things that are happening now and some things that are going to be happening in the coming months. Just as a recap, short session this past year ended on February the 22nd. The governor was very active once the General Assembly sent bills in the budget proposing, as you can see, almost 160 proposed changes to bills, vetoing another almost 160. He proposed over 200 amendments to the changes to the biennial budget that were sent to him, 8 items that were also vetoed. General Assembly came back early April to deal with the governor's recommendations, many of which were rejected. I think, in fact, of the 200 and some budget amendments, I think there were only 30 some that were accepted, and most of them were technical in nature. But the governor gets the last say. He has a deadline of midnight tomorrow night to act on the legislation that was sent back to him. He can either sign it or he can veto it. If he does nothing, unlike at the federal level, the bill becomes law, notwithstanding any action by the governor. And then to this point, 677 measures that the governor has approved. Focus a little bit on the state budget and what he was trying to do with those 200 plus amendments. He was really trying to find more money to put aside in reserve, I think, in anticipation of what may be happening at the federal level and how that might impact state revenues. So there were a lot of reductions, big and small, from different things that the General Assembly had approved that the governor had tried to change. And again, many of those reductions were rejected. We've heard just within the past couple of weeks that the governor is expected to sign the budget, but more recently you're hearing that there may be particular items that he has back in front of him that could be vetoed. He can only really address those items of which he had made recommendations on initially. He doesn't have free rein to go back and veto things that were not addressed in his original recommendations. A couple of items of interest here locally and across the region. There was additional money that was included in the current fiscal year for harmful algal bloom remediation at Lake Anna. There was also that was $250,000, and there was also another $250,000 that was put toward doing some freshwater testing for HABs, which has been something that has been sorely lacking at the state level. There's been no money for that freshwater testing. And then there were a couple of amendments. Charlottesville's low barrier shelter had gotten an appropriation from the General Assembly. And also there was some money included for to help with the Biscuit Run walking trail. Those were both recommended for reduction by the governor, but those were also two amendments that were then rejected by the General Assembly. So those items are back in play or back before the governor for his consideration. So we'll be looking late tomorrow or first of next week when they get loaded on the system for action that he has taken in that regard. Legislatively, I know we reported all throughout the session, really the local legislation that we had at the request of Nelson County that was successful, two House bills, a House bill and a Senate bill that would allow private police officers to have access to Line of Duty Act benefits. I've got that one on the second try. So kudos to Louisa County and all the other folks that were successful in advocating for that. Other things have been discussed and been kind of prominent for us the past couple of years. The 1 cent sales tax for school construction. This was the second year in a row that the General Assembly passed the legislation, sent it to the governor. Second year in a row that the legislation was vetoed. A lot of bills this past year on local land use authority, as we see every year. A couple of big bills really from the past couple of years dealing with local authority to deal with solar development. And then again, many other bills that addressed and oftentimes trying to limit or restrict local government authority on land use. I think we came out pretty good in the end in terms of not a lot of onerous things passing that impacted your local land use authority. I am currently working on a summary of legislation that is approved, and wait till after tomorrow to see what the governor's final action is, and then we'll be getting that out to you really soon. So moving ahead to look forward, I touched on the solar discussions. I think there will be some continued discussions about Virginia Clean Economy Act and solar, probably not as intense as we saw this past year leading up to the General Assembly session. It is an election year, as it is every year in Virginia, but with the House of Delegates up and the 3 statewide offices up, things look a little bit different in the off season when it's an election year. Every year, Virginia Housing Commission takes bills kind of under its wing to look at during the off season. Those are bills that either have been directly referred to the Housing Commission by legislative committees or things that are just kind of directed their way by a letter from the committee chair. They've got, as you see there, about 17 proposals. They're going to parcel those out to 2 different work groups and take a look at those in the coming months. Some of those will probably get ultimately in a different form endorsed by the Housing Commission. I think I've seen as we've moved through the years, just because you've got a legislative commission that has endorsed a bill heading into the next General Assembly session, whether it's Housing Commission or as we saw this past year with the solar bills, freedom of information, doesn't necessarily guarantee that you're going to get your bill passed in the coming session. It seems to be more so that it's not. Speaking of FOIA, Freedom of Information Advisory Council, 2 subcommittees, records and meetings. They've got a number of issues that they will look at. I mentioned just the one, Senate Bill 876 from this past year. Interesting bill. There was some concern from the open government advocates or advocacy organizations that in some instances they'd seen where items had been added to agendas, at the very last minute, like once a meeting had started, and something that they didn't know anything about, the public didn't know anything about, and by the end of the meeting it was being voted on. And they cited some examples where there's some pretty significant things. So legislation was put in to say that if you're going to add something to the agenda after the meeting begins, that you could not act on it that meeting unless it was either time sensitive, don't know how that was going to be defined, or was something that was coming out of a closed session. So that bill ultimately failed. FOIA council is going to look at that, and we'll see where that goes in those discussions. It didn't get a very warm and fuzzy reception when the FOIA council had its initial meeting a couple of weeks ago. And then finally, I wanted to point out legislative study, HJ 443, SJ 253 was approved. It's going to be taking a look at elections and whether state elections, local elections, some or all of them should be aligned with the election timeline for federal elections. So I think is very intriguing to think about. Should they recommend something ultimately that would require a change in the Virginia Constitution, which then has its own other process that lasts a couple of years. So that will be one for monitoring over the next 18 months or so. And then I think this is a final slide, just kind of a little bit more on a couple of special subcommittees. You're familiar with the one that was established last year. Joint subcommittee to take a deeper dive into the JLARC recommendations on K-12 education funding. They've got some short-term goals and recommendations. They've got some issues they're going to look even longer term. Probably the main thing that they put forward from the study this past year was the recommendation to get us back to 2009 and restore the full state support for those instructional support positions, which the General Assembly finally did include the amount of money needed to roll that back completely. So the governor tried to cut that one. Don't know where we'll land on that one after tomorrow. But they're going to continue their work. And then, probably the 2 newest things, and I've written about these in the latest legislative updates. Both the House and the Senate have special committees that they've appointed to look at what's going on with regard to federal revenues, workforce, and other things that are happening at the federal level that may have an impact again on the state budget. So those groups are meeting fairly regularly. House committee has already had 2 meetings. The Senate has just now scheduled its 2nd meeting for later on this month. So I'll be trying to monitor those, passing along information as I can. Depending on how things go, the General Assembly technically is still in a special session. Believe it or not, it is a 2024 special session, not a 2025 special session. So if there is a need for the General Assembly to come back, they do have a mechanism in place to be able to come back pretty quickly to address things that may be happening. And that is all I had for you. Be glad to take any questions.
So I'm familiar with the housing
Mhm.
I'm not clear if there are like corollaries in other disciplines, and your slide mentioned it, but are there other places that our bills get sent to in between sessions to get worse? I don't.
Yep, sometimes that's what happens. Yeah, the Housing Commission and FOIA Council are the ones that probably are shocked the most. I spent a lot of time with this Commission on Electric Utility Regulation, which was dealing with, all things related to Dominion as well as the solar and the regional planning issues. There's Code Commission. I mean, there's a whole list of them that I'd be glad to provide you, but Joint Healthcare Commission, I mean, just probably many prominent topics.
Local.
I'm sorry.
Most of those probably aren't going to be receiving.
Usually not. They're going to be things that have a broader impact or implications from a statewide perspective. Yes. Mhm.
The last couple, oh, I'm sorry. You have your, I do not.
In terms of your time.
The last couple of sessions, they continued to get a little more lenient with electronic meetings. Did anything happen this year with that? That was the
Yeah, we kind of had a pause on that. They had the legislation, I guess, in 2024 that moved for the advisory committees from 25 to 50%. But no changes this past year. In fact, there was very little that happened.
Okay.
I think probably the thing that I think we're going to continue to hear about, it's not necessarily related to meetings, but it's going to be related to notice of meetings and, you having to publish things in the newspaper and the cost of doing that and the timelines that, different publications are on. And I know I just had a conversation with VML about this last week, and I think they're trying to, and so we get this bill every year to try to ease up on that in some way, kind of help local governments out on that. And, the other side does not particularly, care for those bills. But, is there an option out there that would allow for, an electronic posting, either not just on your website, but, through in fact, I think that it's the Virginia Press Association that keeps a database of postings that they receive. But is there some option out there that would allow electronic posting to suffice for, meeting the provisions of posting notice of meetings, but then also still having the discretion for a locality or any other public body to pay to put it into a printed media source? I think that's going to be the one we'll hear more about.
Dave, I was just a bit curious about SB 974, which Glenn Youngkin signed. It's my understanding that bill would allow localities to supplant planning commissions and departments of planning and zoning approval of plats and plans with a quote unquote designated agent.
That is correct.
This was an agent sought by our friends in the developer community.
That would be correct. And the agent would be presumably staff designated by the governing body or the county in your case, not someone that's just chosen kind of at random.
So the idea is to expedite the process of approval.
That is correct. Yeah. 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 There's a number of bills we've been seeing from the past several years. They're just trying to, eat away at the slowness that they say exists with getting approvals. And there was another bill that was approved this session that kind of ate away at some of those timelines and made them shorter for certain approvals or getting things to the state agencies to comment.
That particular point though is textual. Right? There's some sort of more grand, the planning commission, the chair of the planning commission needs to sign this. Planning commissioner stops by and signs it a day later. What's the problem? I think that's a solution in search of a problem there.
I don't know all the anecdotes that they have thrown out there, but I imagine they keep track of them. Because when there's a problem in one area, you have to solve it for the entire state. Remember?
All right.
All right.
Good question.
Great. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Always.
Well, next up we have Gloria Michoczewski, is that right? Georgia. Like Safe Streets, Rivers for All.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. My name is Gorian Georgievsky. I'm a regional planner at the Thomas Jefferson Planning District Commission, working on the Move Safely Blue Ridge Initiative. Online, we have attending Danielle McCrae, who is part of the project team. It's my pleasure tonight to present to you the draft comprehensive safety action plan, which I really hope you had a chance to review it. As a regional project, it is tailored in a way that it has specific chapters for each of the jurisdictions outlining specific solutions for the transportation safety issues in all of the localities. Today's discussion will include the background of the Safe Streets and Roads for All program, TJPDC's leadership commitment, the planning process, the high injury network, the 4 E's of roadway safety, public engagement, proposed solutions, and next steps. Move Safely Blue Ridge is the region's plan to reduce fatalities and serious injuries for all road users, regardless of their mode of transportation. In 2021, a bill was signed into law that became the bipartisan infrastructure law, which established the Safe Streets and Roads for All discretionary program, which enables the commission to apply for a comprehensive safety action plan to support its member localities with their project. This program supports the United States Department of Transportation National Roadway Safety Strategy and its vision of 0 fatalities by 2050. This slide highlights the TJPD Commission's commitment to roadway safety. On April 4, 2024, this commission adopted a resolution to support its member jurisdictions with their projects from the Comprehensive Safety Action Plan. And what they committed to is to reduce the total number of fatalities and serious injuries in Albemarle, Fluvanna, Greene, and Nelson, and to eliminate the roadway fatalities in the city of Charlottesville and reduce the serious injuries by half by 2045. Before I talk about the planning process for the project, I want to acknowledge the project team who, besides TJPDC, included staff from all of the jurisdictions and VDOT. All of the strategies in this plan are that are highlighted are in collaboration with staff and VDOT. So their feedback was very valuable in developing all of the proposed solutions throughout the plan, not just the planning process. Ultimately, the planning process consists of 4 key components and is supported by 3 rounds of public engagement and serves as the foundation for the development of the final safety action plan for adoption. We used many strategies to develop the comprehensive safety action plan, but one of the most important one that we used was the high injury network methodology, which serves as a map that shows the highest concentrations of severe crashes in our region. Just as a note, more than 50% or actually a little close to 50% of the severe crashes in the region occurred in Albemarle County. And this data that the project includes is from 2018 to 2022. All of the strategies in this comprehensive safety action plan are integrated across the 4 E's of roadway safety. By adoption of this plan, all of the localities, the goal is to create a safer and more efficient transportation safety network through engineering, build a culture of roadway safety through education, reinforce safe travels through enforcement, and save lives through emergency response. Public engagement was a key factor for the development of the plan. We did that in 3 rounds through surveys and public engagement across the region. We were present to where the public was to gather that feedback. In round 1, we asked them what are their concerns when traveling throughout the region. What do they think should be fixed. In round two, we had engaged them on strategies again through a survey. But this time we asked them what are the types of solutions they think would be most valuable for transportation safety. And round three is the current round, which is the review of the draft safety action plan. The public has an opportunity to review the plan through the public meetings that are at your localities. So far, we have presented at the 3 localities, and we have 3 to go. I'm not asking the board to adopt the plan tonight, but I will ask the board to adopt the plan in the June meeting, because by then we are hoping that all of the localities have adopted the plan. This is just a high level. Again, I want to thank the project team and VDOT because the proposed solutions are the key part of the comprehensive safety action plan. What that is specific projects outlined in the plan that once the locality adopts the safety action plan, it will position them to be able applicants for implementation funding in future Safe Streets and Roads for All rounds. We have 3 categories of the proposed solutions. We have spot-specific improvements for all of the jurisdictions. These are specific locations at high-risk intersections. Then we have systemic improvements, which are projects that are outlined in the plan, but this can be used for the entire network in the region. And finally, the non-engineering solutions are the policies and programs. These are tailored to address all of the other E's in roadway safety. I mentioned that the adoption of this plan will enable the localities for implementation funding through the Safe Streets and Roads for All program future rounds. However, it will also help them with smart scale applications, the Highway Safety Improvement Program, and revenue sharing. When it comes to the monitoring, the project team plans to do an annual update of the crash data on the website, so we can share that with the jurisdiction, so we can all be in line with current safety transportation trends and further refine our strategies as needed. Through the adoption of this comprehensive safety action plan, the goal is to create a more safer and more efficient network across the entire region. Thank you for your time. I'll be happy to take any questions.
Oriane, just so I have this straight in my own mind, Move Safely Blue Ridge would be a manifestation of the Safe Streets for All DOT funding program if next month grant application receives a fundable school.
So yeah.
Sorry, we repeat, I want to remember the question again, just make sure I understand it.
So Safe Streets for All is a federal DOT program. You have applied for money, you intend to apply for a grant from Safe Streets for All to administer what you are calling Move Safely Blue Ridge.
Yes.
Yes, so there are actually 2 different Move Safely Blue Ridge things going on right now through Safe Streets and Roads for All.
2.
This one, we have already applied for, received the grant. This is a planning grant that is creating a safety action plan. So this is the one that we have been doing for the past year, is now coming to you all in its draft form with the strategies that we're asking you all next month to take action to approve it. Later in tonight's meeting, you're going to hear from a team on potentially applying for another grant, a supplemental planning grant. So that's a separate initiative. The implementation funds, so USDOT has 2 different threads, planning grants and implementation funds. The implementation funds would be your local governments then seeing something within this plan and saying, let's go seek implementation funding to get additional federal dollars in order to implement it. We would not be the eligible applicants for that. That would be the local governments that would have to apply for the implementation.
Next month, you are applying for a planning grant, which if funded, will encourage / coerce localities to submit their own grants for implementation funds as outlined in the Blue Ridge.
Nope, the one we would be applying for separate from this is a supplemental planning grant that you're gonna hear a lot more about in a presentation today.
All right, I give up. Did you listen to the podcast on the Jon Stewart podcast where Ezra Klein came in to talk about his recently published book? And he talked about a program to implement broadband in the United States under the Biden administration. There was something like 15 consecutive steps the applicants had to go through. They had to get a submission for a planning grant. If that was awarded, then they would, only at the end of this entire laborious, ludicrous process would they actually get funding. So I'm not trying to say that this is suggestive of this program here, but you're telling me this is a multi-step process. And perhaps before the end of the year, we'll see some resolution?
In order for local jurisdictions to be able to apply for implementation funding, there does have to be an approved safety action plan. So this is what we did, is develop the plan so that you all could be eligible for implementation funds. What you all decide to do in applying for those implementation funds then becomes a local decision outside of the TJPDC.
And the fact that the TJPDC took on the grant for all 6 organizations meant that the matching money up front was shared by 6 places versus each locality having to do it in and of themselves, which really took the cost up. Is my understanding. So by combining forces, we did a safety action plan for the region, then each body would decide what they want to do moving forward. But if each jurisdiction would have had to do that plan in and of themselves, it may not have occurred. In fact, one jurisdiction almost did not opt in. So how does this help us, the VDOT stuff, smart scale?
Well, the crash data that is in the draft comprehensive safety action plan will help identify needs and will emphasize the application for smart scale through the projects.
And VDOT committed that emphasis would be exploiting something beyond just submitting the application?
I mean, that ultimately should improve the score. So I'm not sure how VDOT will decide to score the projects, but the comprehensive safety action plan should improve the score of the application because it's all based on safety.
That little nugget didn't come up with the MPO.
And we'll be talking very briefly during my executive director's report, but then in further detail later about the scoring methodology for smart scale and changes that it's made over time, and our area being, we get classified as area types, area type A, B, C, and D, and there's different scoring weighting depending on what area you're in. So we'll talk about that a little bit later today on some changes that might take you from safety being 25% of the score to safety being 35% of the score. So we'll talk about that a little bit later, and then we're gonna do a deep dive into it in an upcoming meeting.
Guess I don't have a whole lot of hope for smart scale, but for revenue sharing or the HSIP, that could mean something. Yes. Brought a little more weight to those 2 programs.
All right. Yeah, we still have to present to Albemarle County. So when we come to the board meeting, there's going to be a lot of details about the proposed solutions, specific improvements, and then systemic improvements as well for Albemarle County.
Questions? Thank you, Laura.
Thank you.
Next we have the consent agenda, or maybe like to go take the consent agenda?
Mr. Chair, I move we approve the consent agenda as presented.
I would second with a friendly amendment. As presented, say for the correction of the spelling of my name in the minutes.
Thank you.
So sorry.
It's on purpose. We're just gonna see if you're. Okay. Very well, so we have a motion by Mr. Rutherford, second by Mr. Lonzo, all those in favor? Aye. Chair votes aye, motion passes unanimously. Next, we are moving on to the financial, that's all, new business, safe streets and roads for all. Ms. Jenkins.
Good evening, everyone. So you just had a presentation from Gorian on the regional Safe Streets and Roads for All Move Safely Blue Ridge project. We are here today to talk to you about a supplemental planning grant that the TJPDC is seeking to apply for. And this one specifically will be for the MPO area only, and we'll look at vulnerable road users. So we have Rob Tiemann here today, who is a professor of practice at the University of Virginia for civil and environmental engineering. Specifically, Rob will be our point of contact on the UVA side as part of this partnership that will be between UVA, the MPO, and Honda as well. And so Rob is here to give us an overview of what the grant will be.
Thank you. And thank you very much for inviting me here this evening. Super excited to talk to you about this. I tend to walk around a lot, so I apologize. Do you mind switching?
Yeah, I think that.
So the timing's great. Whoever did the agenda tonight, thank you for carrying us right after the Safe Street for All grant, which we already have. This is a new effort that would dovetail nicely with what you just heard about. So I put a lot of information on this presentation. I don't know if you've had a chance to look at it. Haven't, hopefully you will at some point. Please don't try and read all the words, but I will lead you to what's most important on these slides. Quick overview, the lead applicant is Campo. They will be the grant submitter. The other thing on this slide that's important is under this bar. Here's everybody think they go away.
Darn.
So the other thing you can't see is the budget is $4.62 million over 3 years. And what's really important about that is the 20% match is going to be done 10% by Honda and 10% by UVA. So that means there is zero cost for the MPO for this effort. And what you see here on this bubble display here, it represents a lot of hard work. We have spent an enormous amount of effort to date to bring in stakeholders, get them to the table, get their feedback, and determine what's important to them, so we can craft a good grant application moving forward to actually solve a problem and make a meaningful difference. And what you see here, these will be the key stakeholders throughout the process. So what problem are we trying to solve? If you can see this, I don't know if you can all read it. This is from NHTSA, Safety Organization at the national level. Fatalities for virtual road users or VRUs, 1 fatality every 70 minutes. If you come over here, 1 pedestrian injured every 8 minutes. That is sad, it's stark, and it's sobering. And as you all know, Central Virginia is not immune to this. We're experiencing this as well. It's a very sad situation. VRUs are a focus in the transportation world right now, as you all well know. And unfortunately, the situation has gotten worse in the last few years, especially since COVID. So down here, as you all know, especially in the localities, public expects existing and new roadway systems will safely support all modes of transportation. That means if there's a road and you're a biker, you're a walker, you're a vehicle user, you expect that it will be able to accommodate you, whether it's an existing infrastructure asset or a new infrastructure asset. Lastly, industry challenges. The biggest industry challenge at the moment with VRUs is with risk-based safety design due to minimal VRU crash data and limited understanding of VRU behaviors based on infrastructure characteristics and interactions with vehicular traffic. That's a long, wordy sentence, and I'm going to get into what that means. But this right here is where the industry is struggling, and this is exactly what our grant is going to address. So how did we get here? Honda approached us. Honda approached UVA. They have an internal target of drastically reducing fatalities associated with any Honda vehicle in America by a certain year, like a lot of different companies. They realize they cannot do that just by building better cars. This is a bigger problem, the boundaries are bigger. They specifically came to UVA because they wanted to work with UVA. They specifically came to UVA because they wanted to work in Virginia because of Virginia DOT. So they came to us. The UVA, we kind of circled the wagons and thought about it for a while and thought, what could we do that's meaningful? What could we do that's impactful? And we reached out to VDOT, who connected us with Campo. Goes back to the previous slide. We brought a lot of people in to get us where we are today. I know it's really bad form to read slides to everybody, but I'm going to do that because I think this is important. The objectives of this grant: improve VRU safety, reduce accidents, reduce injury associated mobility and costs, and save lives. That is a noble goal. That's what boards like this should be doing, what research should be doing, trying to save lives. This effort will also improve understanding of VRU interactions with traffic and infrastructure, and I'll explain what that means in a minute. We're going to provide a holistic safety picture to better evaluate realized safety benefits from risk and infrastructure design. I'm going to touch on that as well. And develop models to advance automotive crash avoidance systems to further protect VRUs. And I'll touch on that in the benefits. So what you see here, this is the UVA team that will be working on this. There's two things of importance here. This may seem like silos, especially it came from corporate world. There are definitely silos in most every corporate organization. Don't think of these as silos. Think of these as areas of expertise. That's point number one. Point number two, the people you see on here, this is not the B team. This effort, UVA has decided we are putting forth the varsity. These are the thought leaders in their respective areas of concentration. Bringing these areas of concentration together is unique. And I'm going to talk about why that's important in a minute. This is not typically done when it comes to studying VRU safety. So this is an important slide. There's a lot of words here. Don't try and read them. But I'm going to walk you through what the strategy is of how we're going to approach this, should the grant be granted. First, we're going to collect a lot of data. There's a lot of traffic data out there, especially on vehicles. There isn't just a very, very small fraction of data out there as it relates to pedestrians, scooters, and bikes. Very small amount of data. We're going to collect a lot of data. Some of you may know, UVA does this already. We put sensors on scooters and bikes and people and have them walk around and collect all kind of data to see what they do, see how they react in certain situations. And it's fascinating to connect that behavioral aspect to actually what we do given the circumstances of the traffic. It's very reasonable logically, but we're able to determine that I would act very differently than some of you, given the weather, given the noise, given the geometry of the assets. So we're going to collect a lot of data and we're going to leverage one area of expertise in UVA, which is collecting that data, connecting it to behavioral behaviors and how people act. Then we're going to augment that with VR, virtual reality. UVA has another really cool lab where they can do a lot of virtual reality for scooters and bikers and pedestrians. Very unique. They actually have a contract that they show you that create scooters and bike VR. Very cool. Why is that really important for VR use? Because we don't have much data on near misses. With traffic, vehicular traffic, we have a lot of data, traffic accident data on near misses. Theories, we have very, very little. To make a lot of assumptions. We're going to see if those are true. So we're going to collect and analyze the data. And what that leads to is creating a VRU trajectory model. So in a situation, if I'm walking down the street, here I go, given the geometry of the roadway, given the traffic conditions, the noises, all those things, they will be able to determine, really smart people, what I will likely do, the distribution curve. Will I choose course A, course B, course C? What would be my natural tendency to do whatever course I would pick? Maybe very different than some of you. We're going to create a VRU trajectory model. Then we're going to go to another area of expertise at UVA and create an injury consequence model. So if I choose path A, what would my likely injury be? If I choose choice B, what would my likely injury be? Choice C, what would my likely injury be? Why is that important? We put just bad example, but it's the first one that comes to mind. VTRC, I know, has done a lot of great research on this already. But if it's a 5-foot shoulder, we shrink that to a 4-foot shoulder. Does it matter? Does it save lives? How do you think we know that right now? Do you think we know that right now? Is it going to help with that? Is it going to help with that? Then we're going to another area of expertise right here. If there are any unfortunate accidents, UVA Health has the ability to go in, take a look at the medical file, and see what followed all the way through rehab and everything. They do this for Siren and some other programs with vehicular traffic. They can do it also with VRU, provided the right approval are given by the victim themselves. At the end, we're going to create new and significant insights. Right down here, create a better holistic understanding of VRU safety and effective mitigation designs. How that's going to happen by bringing together all those different areas of expertise, which right now is not being done. A lot of effort right here in this silo, and a lot of effort right here in this silo. Taking a step back and seeing how they all connect, that's what this is going to do. And that's the power of it. So to what end? To what end are we doing this? 4.62 million is a lot of money over 3 years, right? What are we gonna get out of it? The grant holder is Campo. We are very focused to deliver a meaningful deliverable that's tangible and provides benefit to Campo. Otherwise, we shouldn't be doing this, right? So we're going to enhance TJPDC's comprehensive action plan. What that means is where their action plan funding ends for what you're moving forward with, this will pick up right at the end strategically and keep moving it forward. It's super cool. It's focused on safety, accessibility, and equity, and action items with prioritized short midterm timelines, and anything else we can do to help Campo finalize, refine their program with the overall overarching goal, saving lives in a more way. But that's not the only benefit. It's the most important benefit because they're the applicant. That's not the only benefit. And I just listed 4 others. First off, there's a lot of other localities in here that may not directly feel like they're getting benefit. Because most of the effort is going to be in the urban area, right? That's where most of the VRUs are. Not all certainly, but most of them. Charlottesville, urbanized Albemarle. Everyone else who's in this room and represented in this room is going to be able to leverage and stay in conclusions. And that'll all be done through camp. Also, performance-based design. Are you familiar with performance-based design? At all? Anyone? That's it. I'm just being around engineers. Sorry. So how roads were developed for decades and decades and decades. Engineers, we would have these neatly defined manuals on our shelves and kind of blindly, very loyal to whatever they said, right? In every situation. Because that's what AASHTO said. AASHTO is the governing body at the federal level of the make up the rules by which we play the transportation game. This way to say it. So that has changed. It is in the midst of changing. And it is hard. There's a lot of growing pains. We're going away from that kind of blind adherence and loyalty to the manuals and those standard guidelines in every circumstance and going to what we call performance-based design. What that means is we're looking at each individual situation and saying, what makes sense here? We start with the standards, but we don't blindly adhere to them. So that's when you hear things like design waivers, design exceptions, right? Does it make sense to put a 4-foot shoulder here versus 3-foot okay? This study is going to make a big difference in being able to determine if we move from 4-foot to 3-foot, are we risking life? Also, and this really excites me personally, this can provide some great insight in very unique situations. So think of retrofitting an urban intersection in and around that. There is no standard for that, right? So 1-on-1. How do you handle the bikes that are coming through that? How do you handle the scooters that are coming through? A lot of his experience, which is wonderful from the engineers, that this can provide a way to more realistically determine, is this based on data that makes us feel good about how we're feeling and what and verify our decisions. And lastly, Honda and other auto manufacturers, they are chomping at the bit to get this information. Again, the industry problem for VRU safety from a holistic perspective is pairing those behavioral tendencies with what we do in the real life, given the geometry of the roadway. I'm just going to take this information back and use it to help develop their case studies, help refine their code, to benefit them in advancing their accident avoidance systems. And I can tell you, they're a for-profit company, but in every discussion I have with them, there is very much an altruistic nature to things. It is not intended to be proprietary, it is intended to help everyone, because the goal here is to save lives. So the path forward, a lot of these boxes have already been checked. This is a schedule that was put forth, working very closely with Campo. The main goal, of course, is to meet the date of submission. So, which is the end of June, as for Safe Streets for All grant. So this board, should you so agree that this is a good idea, will need to take action as they recommend. And with that, do you have any questions? Yes.
So first I'm gonna start with a comment. I love this. I read every word of your oversight, your overview. It's really, really ambitious with a lot of synergizing parts that, I mean, just being able to pull that off is gonna be very impressive. I I've given some thought to this. You know, I know the poor old anecdote isn't data, but I have an enormous amount of personal data that near missing is with VRU. As since my primary mode of transportation is in fact a scooter. But I assume that, and this is like way in the weeds here, but this, I mean, the lessons learned, I guess, should be portable elsewhere in terms of general principles. I wonder if there's a college and university town in Greene that is going to somehow that needs to be compensated for in the data to broaden it.
That's a great point, and we've talked about that. So, this is actually the second such effort Condon put forward. The first one was in Ohio, and they worked with Ohio State University and Columbus. And large, very different focus, but VRU centered. The idea is there's a lot of pedestrians around Palestine, so you're able to collect a lot of data in a hurry. And a lot of the VRU accidents are younger people and age-rated people. You know, not everybody certainly, but I think there's where there's a perception by some that that's where we could cut down a lot of if we can solve some of those issues. Not all, I certainly understand there are real issues as well. But in answer to your question, yes, that has been talked about with our group. That we will need to normalize the data in some fashion. But it's a way to collect a lot of it.
I think it's fantastic, and it really seems to me you're going to set a standard, this might be like the thing that people look at is the standard of how to do this, because I haven't heard of anybody trying to bring this many pieces into one.
That's why I think it's so exciting, honestly. And
It's a lot of bang for $3.5 million.
I would wholeheartedly agree.
Yeah.
And it will provide a very tangible deliverable to Campo. But at the same time, from a holistic perspective, will really move the ball down the field from a knowledge-based point of view. Yes.
As a Greene County resident and advocate, would there not be merit in considering that one of your partners, the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety?
So potentially, so we're working with CAP. They're one of our UVA centers of excellence, which is the I always forget what it's applied biomechanics lab, something to do with the feed network. Where they break things. It's super cool if you've never been there. They work extremely close with the fan. I mean, they're like this. So they do a lot of car crashing that they already have the established relationship with Honda because of it. So that's not a bad idea, but I think the focus is slightly different and that we're kind of have it a little more research oriented, and the National Insurance Institute is a little more, okay, this is what we have, how do we compare that?
Just that's more of a comment than a question, but I would hope that at the end of this, that y'all can take some of your information and make the traffic situation around between pedestrians and around Scott Stadium and John Paul Jones Arena and improve that. It has been awful forever. Have a school like UVA with as many smart people as there and have not found a way to separate pedestrians and the vehicles. And all these years has been beyond. And hopefully maybe this can do a little bit of it.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Can you emphasize a little more on motorcycle awareness figure?
Yeah, do motorcycles count as VRUs particularly, or they too fast and big?
I'll
Really
say,
good
don't know
question.
that there's a clear
Right.
definition on that, that's all my answer. I think most people who say VRUs within the traffic rules typically are talking bikes, scooters, and pedestrian strollers and such. Even the line of electric bikes, it's a little fuzzy.
Can you help me understand a little bit about what the end product deliverable looks like, right? Because you're talking about these variety of engineering stakeholders and something that can be used by Honda, who wants something to
Yeah.
inform future AI driving technologies, right? And so I hear that and I think, oh, this is a very like technical, like you know, hundreds of CSVs are going to be the output, like things that are not parsable by the layperson. But I also hear there will be a deliverable to Campo. And so I guess I'm trying to understand, like, what is the thing I'm going to hold in my hand with this, right? It's very short memory, very exciting, but like, I don't know that I actually understand what the thing that we tangibly get out of it is.
It's a great question. Thank you for that. So there's I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just gonna add, so since this would be a supplemental planning grant application, this would be an addendum to our existing safety action plan. And since that action plan has a goal of 0 fatalities and serious injuries eventually, this is also gonna help us kind of create that roadmap for what are some things that we can do to help us get there specific to vulnerable road users. That's one thing I would definitely say would be one of the deliverables. Other things we've discussed are more like maybe a toolbox, like what are some things that a jurisdiction could pick up and see as a systemic improvement for pedestrians, for bicyclists, for people on scooters, for things that we might be able to apply broadly. That could be something that comes out of this, or maybe even an educational component, like maybe there's a piece of that as well that could be coming out of this.
Great. Well, go ahead.
Mine more of a comment. I've been sitting in this seat for 14 years, and I think this is the first time I've ever seen UVA and us together for a presentation. So I want to say thank you. It's about time. But, you know, it's good to see UVA at the table, trying to make something happen for the community and working together with us. So I honestly can't remember any time I've seen this happen before. So I want to say thank you for that. And I'm a cyclist, so if you could make it safe out there.
We're trying.
We actually do have one other question.
Yeah.
So it makes a lot of sense that Honda would want to do this if they think they're able to outsource any of their AI bill, right? Like, let's have the government do this research for us. And we'll pay a marginal cost of it. But I'm curious if y'all are aware of any other regulations that might be driving their largesse. Right, like, there's a lot of cool things banks do, and they're heavily driven by the CRA. We don't know what we want to remove. We just need them do it. If there's something that is driving this largesse.
So I'm going to answer your question maybe a little around the bend, but tell me if I don't satisfy your curiosities. So the emphasis of this project does not satisfy Honda. Let me be very clear on that. We are not providing them code. We are not providing them any information that their engineers could and would do themselves, to my knowledge. What we are doing is partnering with Honda to provide them a larger view of the VRU situation that I'm not sure they have as partisan. Because that's what they do. That's where they spend their money designing cars. What we are providing in this grant is a much broader perspective, taking a look at the infrastructure design, taking a look at how people be paid, which are things that they may not necessarily do. And once again, the key deliverable is not that Honda. They are interested in making what is in their world, honestly, a very small contribution of money from their research department in forwarding the knowledge down the field, which can help them meet their goals. So if the information is utilized by Campo and saves lives here, that helps their goal.
And you said the data collected not be proprietary, so it would be open to other car manufacturers or other people interested in the issue, or is it going to be proprietary to Honda?
I'm not an attorney. I will say that Campo is the grant holder. It is their problem.
I would think any deliverable would be.
Right.
To circle back to Hunter's interest, this stuff happens. It's one of those things, right, where your liability for not having done your due diligence gets really big, it's really, really fast. Well, why don't you do this model? And look at all these people who are working on these avoidance systems. Your avoidance system can take advantage of this. You try to check.
So I would reiterate what Mr. Smith said. It's wonderful that UVA work in collaboration with the city and strengthen that which feeling. It has not been in front of a UVA professor for a couple of decades. It's wonderful to have that presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Village speaker.
We get any credit for this course? I am invited. You
don't want to be charged for half a credit hour at UVA.
Mr. Chairman, can I make a motion?
Yes.
I would like to, do I have to read the whole resolution?
But there's a draft motion if you
Oh,
want to take
really?
it. Yep.
I did not see that.
Then you take the director's report. I'm happy to read it if you want
Why
to.
don't you do that?
Staff recommends a motion to pass a resolution supporting the FY 25 Safe Streets and Roads for All supplemental planning and demonstration grant application in the Charlottesville Albemarle Metropolitan Planning Organization.
What the executive director said.
I will second. A motion by Mr. Smith, second by Mr. Ronde, all those in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes enthusiastically aye. Yes, thank you for your vote. All right, moving on next. We have the nominating, the Regional Water Safety Planning, RPU one resolution.
Regional water supply planning. Yes, so in October of last year, there was an effective code amendment to the Virginia Code requiring regional water supply planning instead of local only. And they also defined these regional planning areas by river basins. We are largely a part of the Middle James 1 Regional Planning Unit, which includes Charlottesville, Albemarle, Greene, Fluvanna, Louisa, and Buckingham counties. Nelson is in a different RPU. And the kickoff meeting with DEQ was held about a month ago. And at that meeting, the RPU members present asked TJPDC to coordinate the planning efforts on behalf of the RPU. So, I have sent a memo to each of your county and city officials, letting them know that you all are considering this resolution tonight to authorize us to act as that lead coordinator for the planning effort, and also apply for the grant administration funds. Small pot is like $8,000 for the current fiscal year, which, as you know, the current fiscal year is rapidly ending. There's a little bit of an extension for that. And then the resolution also affirms each of your jurisdictions' participation in the RPU. Buckingham is separately considering a resolution for RPU participation, and then Nelson will be separately doing a resolution to participate in the RPU that they are a part of, which is Middle James 2. The VAPDC will be advocating for more funding at the General Assembly. We are expecting a similar amount of administrative funding, about $8,000 for fiscal year 26, but that hasn't been announced officially yet. We don't know when the application will be. We have already been awarded the funds, but we're awaiting that grant contract. It's supposed to come in early June, and once that happens, we'll be able to schedule the kickoff meeting with our stakeholders. It's unclear whether or not we will need consultants to help with this project. The final regional water supply plan is not required to be completed and submitted to DEQ until 2029. So there's a good amount of time. And I imagine there will be a number of things that change. But one thing we do know is that a lot of the data that's needed for this plan is already in your local water supply plan. So it's going to be a lot of just coordinating and making sure that everyone's on the same page and all the data is in the same place. And then potentially, working on strategies to secure our water supply for the future. Do you guys have any questions about the resolution or the intent of the water supply planning?
Okay. We have a motion for the resolution.
From the executive director's report, staff recommends a motion to approve a resolution designating the TJPDC as the lead agent in the regional planning unit, Middle James River 1's regional water supply plan, and supporting a grant application to the Virginia Department of Environmental Quality for planning grant funds.
I so. All right, motion by Mr. Ronde,
Second.
Second, Mr. Pruitt, and, all those in favor? Chair votes aye. All right, moving on to the next item is, the nominating committee presentation.
So this is just the, just to kick it off, you guys elect officers at your June meeting for the bylaws. The nominating committee has to, present their slate in the May meeting. So in April, you all, identified or appointed the nominating committee consisting of, Mr. Galloway, Mr. Rutherford, and Mr. Grunzio. And then they met and will, share their presented slate and then answer any questions or any discussion. So whoever would like to be the spokesperson.
I nominate either Phil or Ned to talk from the nominating committee.
We met last Thursday, we reconvened again this past Tuesday. All individuals that could be impacted by the slate, it will discuss with them, so everybody was kind of in on the conversation. But the slate would be to continue the two jurisdictions that are currently in leadership, Fluvanna in the chair role, Charlottesville the vice chair role. But switching the Fluvanna chair would be Mr. Smith as the nominated for the chair role, Mr. Payne to continue as vice chair, and Mr. Duranzio to step in as the new treasurer. So that would be the slate that we came to agreement on, and then Jesse or Phil want to add any comments.
And of course. Ms. Jacobs, senior secretary.
Oh, yes.
And, you know, I think since I've been on the nominating committee, it feels like several years in a row. It has been a sound tradition, and I remember who told me this once was Tommy Barlow, trying to make sure that we're representing urban, rural, and as best we can in alternating and on the executive committees. Though not in writing, it's just usually been something we try to eyeball as long as people are able to fill those specific roles. So, thank you guys.
I have to say that Mr. Smith bribed me intensively, so that it is well deserved, I think, to finally see Mr. Smith, you know, seated in the chair coming up, so.
Thank you.
Very well. Anything else? Let's see, we now have the draft FY 26 budget total revenue and local contributions. Ms. Jacobs.
Ruth is gonna pull up the presentation. Also included in the meeting materials is a fairly lengthy detailed memo on the budget in case you want to really dig into specific details. And then I also included in the budget the copy of all of the draft revenues within the budget, as well as all the local contributions broken out by program. As you guys are well familiar with this, we have the three-part process where in September and October of last year, 2024, we project the budget in order to set the per capita rate so that we can apply to the local governments in their budget process for the local funding. We then come to you now, it's usually April, May. This year we voted to defer it a little bit in order to complete the classification and compensation study. So draft in May, we'll come back to you in June for consideration for approval. And then as the year changes, we get to February and March of 2026. Anything that has changed, any grants that have been received is amended so that our financial audit is based on that amended budget with the most accurate projections for the year. Right, so this is the TJPDC's largest budget. It is 49.6 million revenues and expenditures. It is a balanced budget as is required. For the next one, I broke out these two tables. The first bar chart that you're seeing is our total revenues, that 49 million broken out by source. So you can see that just under 73% of our revenues are from a federal source, state at over 12, local at over 14, and then the local per capita member assessment is 0.4% of the budget. I then went ahead and pulled out body and the Blue Ridge Cigarette Tax Board so that you can really see the impact of that and look at our operating budget exclusive of those two large programs so that it brings our federal share down to 62, state up above 16.5, and then you can see that that local share is higher. These are non-body federal revenues. So what I did is pull out body again, because otherwise it's not much of a pie chart because body takes up the entire pie. So I pulled that out just so it didn't skew the data. But our non-body federal revenues are 2.2 million. And you can see on this slide, they are broken out by source. You can see our largest federal source outside of body is the Home Consortium. I have 18,813. I know that is different than what you saw in the presentation because we are managing multiple grant years at a time. They are 5-year grants, so they're overlapping, so there's anticipated to be 813 to be spent in this next fiscal year across those grants. The next highest source would be the home ARP funding. That was the one-time ARPA funds that we received. And then second to that is transportation programs, looking at Campo. Safe Streets will be closing out, and then if we're awarded a grant, we'll be added back in. I did not include that in the budget because it is a confirmed revenue source, and I only included here what is either confirmed or is very likely to be awarded. I don't put anything in the budget that we have no idea if we're gonna get it or not. Next one is state revenues. Again, if you pull out the body state funding source, it is just under 600,000 in state revenues. Our largest state programs are then also transportation. We've got rideshare. We do have, you'll see off to the upper left, the DHCD contribution. That's the annual funding that we receive from the state. You'll also see transit planning, which is a technical assistant merit grant from DRPT, the MPO funding that we receive, the state match to that from VDOT and DRPT, and then path and mobility management programs. Upper right-hand side is where you see the housing. Local revenues, 7.1, but if you pull out the cigarette tax revenue that passes through us and you pull out the local match for the body program, we're looking at 574,000 in local revenues. Again, broken out by program. You can see the largest one for this is legislative services, and then it goes into some of our transportation programming. Off to the right, you'll see the other, that 90,000, that's rental income from our tenant spaces back here. It's renting this space out. It is bank interest. You'll also see at the top, this is a new one. Incorporated in this budget, 26,000 is a capital reserve transfer. And that is an initial estimate. It's a placeholder, to be honest with you. It's an initial estimate if we were to consider building renovations. We will be pulling the buildings committee together to be able to talk with our owners and landlords about what types of renovations we are looking to do. Flooring, paint, things like that, just some, cosmetic upgrades in order to bring this place, not to have ripped carpet. They are willing to do the work in advance and then spread it out across our 5-year 5-year lease. Should we re-sign a lease, again, that will come to the buildings committee once we have a draft lease in our hands. So I do have in there a placeholder to be able to pull some funds to be able to pay for those renovations. Next. And then the next one is local per capita. So our local per capita member assessment is 184, split out by jurisdiction based on population from Weldon Cooper. Projections. Then if you look at our $49 million budget, 47.2 million passes through us. So 95% of our funding comes in and goes out, whether that's tax revenue to the local governments, whether that is to subrecipients, whether that's private, contractor for the broadband project. You can see the list of places that pass-through funding goes below. And then the operating expenses are 4.83% of our budget. Like I talked to you guys about, we have a very lean operating budget for the amount of work that we're doing and the amount of money that's passing through. Personnel expenses are 76% of that operating budget. Included in this budget is the recommendation from the classification and compensation study. It was option 3B that in the last commission meeting, through consensus, you all asked me to try to make it work within the budget. It does work within the budget. We were able to balance it with a 1-year implementation timeline. So that is an increase in base salary of 268,000 from previous fiscal year. And then at the very bottom is our fringe expense, and that's just all of the fringe benefits, FICA, state unemployment, health insurance. It is noted in here that our health insurance rate for the base plan did go up 12%, very similar to what's been happening to a lot of other organizations. And then as you all also voted to add an additional health insurance plan to our offerings. And then this one I wanted to highlight is our indirect cost rate. The indirect cost rate for this organization over time has fluctuated significantly to very high levels. We are down to the lowest indirect cost rate that we have ever had. I'm very proud of that. However, I also caution that 41% does not cover our rolling average of operating expenses. So as you guys remember, in FY24, whatever your actual costs were for administration is what sets your rate for 2 years later, FY26. So in some of these last few years where we have had large net gains, we anticipate there could be a need to be able to use some of those in order to cover if we do not recuperate through our indirect cost rate, our actual expenses. The budget right now balances, but as you guys know, a lot changes between right now and when it comes back to you in February and March. So what we're showing here is the trend over time is we are bringing this down. So the 10-year average has been 67%. When I first started here, there was advice given to me that 65 is your sweet spot. That's where you want to make sure your indirect costs are, because then you'll make sure whatever revenue you're bringing in will cover those administrative costs. Through a lot of very intentional changes to how we build programs for administrative costs, and through some unintended consequences of having vacancies where administrative staff is billing to programs, that indirect cost rate has come significantly down. However, you're looking at that 5 and that 3-year average, it looks like our sweet spot is actually closer to the mid-50s. That if we were to bring in an indirect cost of the mid-50s, that would cover our administrative expenses without having these large net gains and net losses, fluctuating from year to year. So just wanted to highlight the 41 is in the FY26 budget. I do expect it to come up for the FY27 budget. Because now that we are fully staffed, we'll have a lot less of the administrative team doing programmatic work. I think within the packet is all the spreadsheets. I'm happy to go into any deep dive that you all want. I certainly know you have 30 days between now and the next time this comes up. If there's anything you want additional information on that you want me to bring to the June meeting, I am happy to provide to you whatever. I have a program spreadsheet by program, by revenue source, by staff member for every single activity that we do. So any level of detail that you're interested in, I can bring to your attention. Happy to take questions.
Do we need to cover the items discussed in the executive?
We will, yes, we will need to cover this.
When will we do that?
First we need to do that in closed session. So we may want to defer a vote on this until closed session. Right now, what is in the draft budget is directly out of that study. I think since my compensation is more from the board, not necessarily only from data, it would make sense to defer the vote.
Okay. So no questions, then we will come into a closed
Oh,
session.
you don't have to vote on the budget though, not until June.
Not until.
That's my apologies. You don't have to take action on this budget until June. If something comes out of the closed session and this needs to be amended, we'll have time to do it before action in June.
But I think what we're asking is discussions we had today at the finance committee. Is it coming up now for discussion?
No. Not really, that next session. Okay.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I got confused.
No, sounds all right. Thank you for the clarification. It's good to see that the soon to be chair is paying attention.
I go for my nap. Old people like to take naps.
Very well.
Would you like me to read the?
Yes, please. Go for it.
I, Keith Smith, move that the commission be convened to a closed session pursuant to the exception found in section 2.2-3, 711, A as in Alpha 1 of the Code of Virginia. Discuss matters of employee performance of the executive director. Second. All right, you got a first and second.
All right, roll call.
We're doing roll call. Okay.
Supervisor Galloway,
Yes.
Supervisor Pruitt,
Aye.
Chair O'Brien.
Aye.
Mr. Smith.
Aye.
Supervisor Goolsby,
Aye.
Mr. Higgins,
Aye.
Supervisor Barlow is absent. Supervisor Woodward,
Aye.
Supervisor Reed,
Yes.
Supervisor Rutherford,
Aye.
Commissioner Duranzio,
Aye.
Councilor Payne.
Yes.
Very well.
Mr. Chairman.
We did.
They're not recording that, so.
Yeah, we gotta get it.
We recording?
Yes.
Okay.
I, Keith Smith, move that the commission exit closed session motion. We need a second.
A second.
All right.
Motion made by Mr. Smith, seconded by Mr. Reed. Roll call, please.
Supervisor Galloway,
Yes.
Supervisor Pruitt,
Aye.
Supervisor O'Brien,
Aye.
Mr. Smith,
Aye.
Supervisor Goolsby,
Aye.
Mr. Higgins,
Aye.
Supervisor Barlow, Supervisor Woodward,
Aye.
Supervisor Reed,
Yes.
Supervisor Rutherford,
Aye.
Commissioner Duranzio,
Aye.
Counselor Payne.
Yes.
I, Keith Smith, move that the commission certify to the best of each member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from the open meeting requirements of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act and identified in the motion authorizing a closed session were heard, discussed, or considered in this closed session. Okay.
Okay, motion carried. I think it's just Smith, seconded by Mr. Duranzio. Beat you to it, Mr. Burrow, sorry. Roll call, please.
Supervisor Galloway,
Yes.
Supervisor Pruitt,
Aye.
Chair O'Brien.
Aye.
Mr. Smith,
Aye.
Supervisor Goolsby,
Aye.
Mr. Higgins,
Aye.
Supervisor Woodward,
Aye.
Supervisor Reed,
Yes.
Supervisor Rutherford,
Aye.
Commissioner Duranzio,
Aye.
Counselor Payne.
Yes.
All right, very well. Apparently, I skipped the executive director's report, so Ms. Jacobs,
Three quick items on that one. In your previous meeting, you guys approved the rural transportation work plan. And having it reviewed by VDOT and SPR funds are eligible to be used for hardware, software, and technology necessary to do the scope of work. So we went in and amended language in section 8. Oh, yeah, page 8, section D, to specifically call out computer and other technology purchases. So when we need to replace a laptop, we can bill it to the program. It does not require action from you all, but we are required to notify the commission of a change in language within an approved plan. So we added that so that we can recover that expense. The second item is a letter that staff received from the U.S. Department of Transportation, from the Transportation Secretary, U.S. Transportation Secretary. This is just an effort to keep you guys abreast of the uncertain federal landscape, the communications that we're receiving. The letter was sent to all recipients of federal financial transportation assistance. It clarifies that all recipients of federal funds have to follow all applicable federal laws. It further stipulates equal protection principles, prohibiting entities from discriminating, quotes the Civil Rights Act, talks about Title VI, Title VII, other relevant acts. It does provide further guidance on policies, programs, or activities that are discriminatory related to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the recipient's legal obligations to cooperate with federal authorities. So really, this is just an act of transparency to share with you all the communications that we're receiving. There hasn't been any direct requests for us to do anything different, but we will be really diligent in reviewing the language of our agreements and the language of our plans to make sure that we are complying with federal law and state. And then the third one, any questions on that one? Okay.
all right, it's equal opportunity, but no diversity, equity.
Yeah.
All right,
Okay, next one is smart scale area types. This one is really just bringing this to your attention now with the intent of coming back and doing a more thorough presentation on it. Just wanted to share it with you as quickly as we could after receiving it. TJPDC and VDOT have been having some discussions about how our smart scale applications projects are scored and trying to better understand the different area types on how the methodology for scoring is developed. And so by that, big words down to little words is metropolitan areas are type A. It's based on density. They are all scored with the same methodology. And I put information in your packet to show you what weight is safety, what weight is congestion, what weight is economic development. There are then B, C, and D types. There is a map that I provided to you all that shows that the majority of rural areas within the Commonwealth are type D. If you look at the map, you will see TJPDC's rural areas surrounding Charlottesville are type C, which is very different than the rest of the Commonwealth. And so that does change the weighting for those different categories. VDOT did a lot of analysis on our behalf. They went back and looked at the last 3 rounds, round 4 of Smart Scale 5 and 6, and rescored the projects as if we changed our area types for rural areas from D to see how they would have scored. And across the board, the majority of those scores would have improved. They would have increased with a couple of exceptions. There's a couple of exceptions in projects in Louisa where the score already was significantly low. It wasn't competitive. It was like a 0.68 and it went to a 0.66. So it would not have changed the competitiveness, but the score did come down. The vast majority of scores went up, and there were actually a couple projects that would put us right in line for having been next funded. So we were bringing this to your attention. We're also, we've already talked about the Rural Transportation Advisory Committee. We've brought it to their attention so that they can start having conversations among staff. And then we're gonna forward both a memo and all of this information on to your CA, to your leadership, to see if there is consensus in the area of considering changing the area type for the rural jurisdictions. And what that would do, and it's detailed in the memo that's in the packet, is that would increase the priority for safety in the rural areas, and it will decrease some of the other weighted categories. So really, I'm putting this before you because I think it's gonna probably be a very quick discussion that has to occur in order for us to then go to the Office of Intermodal Planning and Investment, OIB, who then brings it to the Commonwealth. I know it's my favorite acronym to say out loud, OIB. Who it has to be considered by the Commonwealth Transportation Board. So this would have to be an act of the Commonwealth in order to change the area type if there was consensus. It is not something that you can change by individual jurisdiction. It has to be done by the planning district. And so it would have to be all rural jurisdictions agreeing to change their type. What is also unique when you look at the map is Nelson is in the Lynchburg construction district. The rest of you all are in the Culpeper construction district. All of the other localities within the Lynchburg district that are rural are a different area type than Nelson. And so if we did this, it would put them more in line and competitive with their surrounding rural counties, as well as change the rural counties in our part of the Culpeper district. So something to consider, really important information to have at your fingertips. How this escalates up to decision makers within your jurisdiction and comes either to your board or a decision is made at the commission level. We're gonna have to navigate. We've not done this before, but there is precedent in the Commonwealth that other areas have requested area type changes and have had them successfully changed. Okay. You have information in your packet if you want to learn a lot more about that and then be prepared to ask questions the next time we bring it to you guys.
Great.
Thank you.
And seeing no questions, we'll now move on to the roundtable.
Very don't forget that.
What's that?
Well, very nice.
Yeah.
We talked about it with the mayors and chairs, so
I heard it twice.
Apologies.
Do it here, not everybody will. Cheers.
Okay, anybody dying to speak right now? Not if, I'll just kind of open it up, so whoever wants to go, go.
And that's a lot to say.
Okay.
A couple of things. We finished up all of our budget stuff voted over Monday night, and I think we're pretty happy with it. We messed with our rate, but we did be able to rebate it by 3.3%. Which amounts to 2.6 cents, I think. So it brings us from 72 cents down to 69.4 or 69.6, something like that. So that's it for that. We are really excited. Opened the bids last week for our standalone CT center, which Louisa County has never had. Had 6 bidders, the bids were competitive. We have agreed to go ahead as far as the funding on Monday night. And the school board meets next week. I think they will say that. I think we'll have the groundbreaking on May 14th. So yeah, it's exciting. So anyway, that's all.
All right. Next, Mr. Perry, you look like he's not gonna say something official.
Sure, I guess quickly, early voting begins Saturday for local primaries. So we our first election is ranked choice voting in Charlottesville. So everyone's curious to see how that plays out. Likewise, recently adopted our budget, didn't have any tax increases this year, but maintained previous commitments to affordable housing, climate, and transportation. We're continuing on the land bank ordinance to hopefully facilitate the acquisition of land for affordable housing. City's working on a tax abatement program as part of our inclusionary zoning, which requires affordable housing and projects of 10 units or more. Basically, a tax incentive to try to encourage developers to build those projects. Although what we're finding is the current market conditions, most projects just aren't penciling out, even if you don't include any inclusionary zoning. So that's really the main thing we're encountering. And then probably the biggest news is the city acquired the Federal Executive Institute for $0 in interest. And saga, the Trump administration abolished the Federal Executive Institute by executive order. And we realized shortly after that, there were pre-existing regulations for how the federal government disposes of land. So when they get rid of it, if anyone submits a proposal for a homeless shelter, the federal government technically is legally required to give it to that applicant. The federal government rule can't be used for that purpose because of historic preservations existing on that site. But below that, if a public education institute submits an application for public education use, it receives a top priority over any other applicants, and they get it for $0. So together with our city schools, we submitted an application. UVA did as well. Unfortunately, the city got it. And that's 14 acres with existing buildings for $0. That would be a big role for unified pre-K education center for the city, as well as some administrative offices and other things in schools. So that would be an exciting, strange possibility.
I think the story was on NPR as well too. It actually sounded like that was going to go to the UVA to extend the city initial that reporting.
Yeah, I mean, they submitted an application, but you know, it was just a lot of uncertainty over who and how the federal government would make their determination. So
And interesting that that used to be a hotel too. Didn't realize that.
yeah,
We're gonna make that, so a lot of history there.
yeah, and it's a I mean, it's a really, I mean, they recently updated a lot of the buildings. It's a beautiful campus. It has a swimming pool.
Two swimming pools. I think.
Yeah, so it'll definitely need renovations, but it's like, it's a huge,
91,000 square feet.
yeah.
Don't really need, highly trained federal executives.
Congratulations.
No.
Yeah.
I think they trained over 30,000 federal executives since 1969 or something like that. That's what,
Yeah, Jonathan Johnson created it, but no more, but.
You're on to, you're on.
No, I don't really have left here. Yeah, right, I'm just a backup singer now, but
Back up there. Winky. Mr. England.
My 60-second summary, last week, a contingent from TJ came up to our Board of Supervisors meeting in Greene County. Lorianne, Gaylor, Sarah Simba, and I believe Daniel McCrae was in attendance also. Lorianne gave a presentation on Move Safely Blue Ridge. He outlined the sites in Greene County that are proposed for remediation. Lorianne's presentation elicited a good amount of feedback from our Board of Supervisors. And I will say, as an attendee and observer, it looks like the board is amenable to participating in Move Safely Blue Ridge.
Mr. Goldsby, you want to follow up there?
Yes, we've taken our final vote to May 13th on their finalizing their budget for the year, and we actually dropped the real estate down. There's a equalization from the 71 to 69, and their personal property from 450 down to 4. So for the last 2 years, we came down on the property levels on there for Greene County to help the community a lot.
So you were level funded and you didn't put your budget involved.
Pretty much equal out, I think. It went up, but if we finalized it on, I think the EMS, all that usually, usually is a big hit for any community in any county. But, you want to put public safety before anything really, so it's, the sheriff department and EMS didn't get totally what they wanted, but they got what they needed to sustain and keep, keep the community safe. So that's the biggest thing there. We're still trying to hash out this whole water impoundment thing. So hopefully within the next month, we're going to get started on getting all that figured out. And we get some ground moved or something on that too, to hopefully. That's where we're at.
Awesome.
And new Harley stores. Turn them up.
There you go. Buying your bike?
No,
Not
I
yet.
got two, right, well, I said that buy another one, I'd get rid of two of the others. And make them- Yeah, I have my fair share, I'm never gonna forget.
Let's have a motion, you wanna get rid of it.
Alright. Well, since I got Ernie, I've been looking at him for the last minute while I'm staring at the
We're still working with, the Berkeley group on our zoning ordinance updates. We had a joint meeting with, board of supervisors and planning commission on that. Also independently working on our, changes to short-term rental ordinances. We had a large working group meeting this week, discussing different possibilities. Stay tuned. Everything else is kind of stay tuned stuff. We have, our next board meeting on the 13th. We're gonna get our presentation from Move Safely Blue Ridge. At that meeting, we're gonna also get the final plan for the new Department of Social Services building, which will include price tag and all the funding data that we need to be able to put it out to bid. And we'll also have our budget public hearing on our 18th session.
Mr. Rutherford.
Yep, zoning underway, gonna be fun, exciting. I think as it relates to other moving parts in the counties, raising kids for rentals is discussion point. I, of course, had many opinions of the zoning, as we were talking about block minimum sizes. We have some stuff that was proposed that looking to do a good reflection of the needs. Out of curiosity, how many of y'all have C1 as an agricultural zoning? Districts, or are you guys mostly all A1?